The penthouse gleamed under the Manhattan skyline, its floor-to-ceiling windows framing a city that never slept. Ethan Caldwell, CEO of Caldwell Enterprises, stood at the edge of the room, a glass of bourbon in hand, his sharp jawline catching the light as he stared out at the glittering sprawl. At 38, he was the picture of success: tailored suit, piercing blue eyes, and a reputation for ruthless precision in the boardroom. His tech empire, built on cutting-edge AI and real estate analytics, had made him a billionaire before 30. But tonight, his mind wasn't on market shares or acquisitions. It was on her, Lila Monroe, the woman who'd walked into his life like a storm and now threatened to unravel it. Lila had been a vision when they met 2 years ago at a charity gala. Her emerald green dress clung to her curves, her auburn hair cascading in waves that seemed to defy gravity. She was a model, not the kind who graced runways but the kind who turned heads in exclusive circles, art galleries, private clubs, the kind of places where wealth whispered rather than shouted. Ethan had been drawn to her immediacy, the way her laugh cut through the room's pretension, the way her hazel eyes held his without flinching. She wasn't intimidated by his status, and that alone had hooked him. They'd married 6 months later in a whirlwind ceremony on a private island, the kind of event that made tabloid headlines and fueled office gossip for months. But now, everything was different. Lila was pregnant, 6 months along, and Ethan felt the walls closing in. The pregnancy hadn't been planned, and while Lila glowed with a quiet strength, Ethan's world felt like it was tilting off its axis. The demands of his company were relentless. A hostile takeover bid from a rival firm had him working 18-hour days, and the pressure to maintain his image as the untouchable CEO was suffocating. Lila's pregnancy, her sudden shift from carefree muse to expectant mother, felt like a chain he hadn't signed up for. He loved her, or at least he thought he did, but the life they'd built together no longer fit the one he wanted. Enter Sophia Voss. She was everything Lila wasn't: polished, calculating, and unattached. A former colleague turned venture capitalist, Sophia had re-entered Ethan's life at a recent conference, her sleek blonde hair and tailored blazers a stark contrast to Lila's bohemian warmth. Sophia understood his world: the late nights, the high-stakes deals, the need to stay sharp and unencumbered. Their flirtation started innocently enough. A shared drink, a knowing glance, a conversation that lingered too long. But it had escalated quickly, and Ethan found himself addicted to the thrill, the escape. Sophia didn't ask for promises or permanence. She was a mirror to his ambition, reflecting back the version of himself he missed, the man who answered to no one. Tonight, Lila sat on the plush sectional in their penthouse, her hand resting on her swollen belly, her eyes scanning a tablet for nursery designs. She wore a loose linen dress, her hair pulled into a messy bun, and Ethan couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. She was beautiful, even now, but the sight of her stirred something else: resentment, maybe, or fear. He couldn't pinpoint it, but it gnawed at him. He'd been distant for weeks, and she'd noticed. Her questions had grown sharper, her silences heavier. He knew he couldn't keep dodging her forever. Ethan, she said, her voice soft but firm, we need to talk. He turned from the window, his grip tightening on the glass. About what? She set the tablet down, her eyes locking onto his. You've been checked out. I'm not stupid. I know something's going on. His pulse quickened, but he kept his face neutral, a skill honed from years of negotiations. It's work, Lila. You know how it is. The takeover bid. Don't. She cut him off, her voice steady but laced with pain. Don't hide behind work. I deserve better than that. The air between them crackled with tension. Ethan's mind raced. He could lie, double down, but Lila's gaze was unrelenting. She'd always had a way of seeing through him, and it was one of the things he'd loved about her, until now. Now, it felt like a trap. He set his glass on the counter, the clink echoing in the quiet room. I'm not hiding, he said, but the words sounded hollow even to him. Then tell me the truth, she said, standing now, her hands on her hips. Who is she? The question hit like a sucker punch. Ethan's jaw clenched, and for a moment, he considered denying it. But the weight of the secret was too heavy, and Sophia's name burned on his tongue. He'd already made his choice, hadn't he? The late-night texts, the stolen moments in hotel suites, the promises whispered in the dark. He couldn't keep living this double life. Her name's Sophia, he said finally, his voice low. She's someone I've been seeing. Lila's face didn't crumple as he'd expected. Instead, her expression hardened, her eyes narrowing. Seeing, she repeated, the word dripping with disdain. While I'm carrying your child. It's not like that, he said, but the excuse sounded pathetic even to him. Things got complicated. I didn't plan this. Complicated. Lila's voice rose, sharp and cutting. You think this is complicated for you? I'm the one growing a human, Ethan. I'm the one who's been here, waiting for you to show up for us. And you're out there with her. He took a step toward her, but she held up a hand, stopping him. Don't, she said. Just, don't. The silence that followed was suffocating. Ethan's mind churned, searching for a way to fix this, but every path led to the same truth. He didn't want to fix it. He wanted out. The realization hit him like a freight train, and before he could stop himself, the words spilled out. I think you should leave, he said. Lila froze, her breath catching. What? I can't do this anymore, he said, his voice steadier now, fueled by a reckless resolve. This life, this, us. It's not working. I'll make sure you're taken care of, but I need you to go. Her eyes widened, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of fear beneath her anger. You're kicking me out. While I'm pregnant. I'll set you up in an apartment, he said quickly, as if logistics could soften the blow. You'll have everything you need. Money, support, she spat, her voice trembling now. You think money fixes this? You're abandoning your wife and child for some fling. It's not a fling, he snapped, and the admission hung between them like a guillotine. I'm done pretending, Lila. I don't want this life anymore. She stared at him, her chest heaving, and for a moment, he thought she might slap him. But instead, she laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that sent a chill down his spine. You're a coward, she said. You think you can just erase me. Erase us. You have no idea what you're throwing away. She turned, grabbing her purse from the couch, her movements sharp and deliberate. Fine, she said. I'll go. But don't think this is over, Ethan. You're going to regret this. She stormed out, the door slamming behind her, and Ethan stood there, his heart pounding, the bourbon in his hand suddenly tasting sour. He told himself he'd done the right thing, that this was freedom, that Sophia was the future he wanted. But Lila's words echoed in his mind, and a nagging unease settled in his gut. Days later, the news hit like a thunderbolt. Ethan was in a board meeting, half listening to a presentation on quarterly earnings. When his assistant slid a tablet in front of him. The headline screamed, Secret Heiress Revealed. Lila Monroe, long-lost daughter of real estate titan Victor Grayson. Ethan's blood ran cold. Victor Grayson was a legend, a reclusive billionaire whose real estate empire dwarfed Ethan's tech ventures. The article detailed Lila's origins, born to a mother who'd hidden her from Grayson's world, raised in obscurity until a recent DNA test confirmed her lineage. She wasn't just his estranged wife, she was the heir to a fortune that made his own look modest. Ethan's mind reeled. Lila had never mentioned her past, never hinted at this kind of wealth or connection. Had she known? Had she played him? The implications were staggering. If Lila was Grayson's heir, she held influence that could crush his company, sway markets, ruin him. And he'd just thrown her out, pregnant and betrayed, for a woman who now seemed like a fleeting distraction. He tried calling her, but her number was disconnected. He sent emails, texts, even showed up at the apartment he'd leased for her, only to find it empty. Lila had vanished, and with her, any chance of undoing his mistake. Sophia, sensing his distraction, grew distant, her allure fading as Ethan's world unraveled. The takeover bid intensified, His investors grew jittery, and whispers of Lila's new status began to ripple through elite circles. Weeks later, at a high-profile real estate summit, Ethan saw her. Lila stood at Victor Grayson's side, her pregnancy barely visible beneath a tailored black dress, her auburn hair swept back, her presence commanding. She was no longer the bohemian model he'd married. She was a force, radiating power and poise. Grayson, a silver-haired titan with eyes like steel, introduced her as his daughter and successor. The room buzzed, but Lila's gaze found Ethan's, and in it, he saw no trace of the woman he'd hurt. Only resolve. You have no idea what you're throwing away, she'd said. Now, as she moved through the crowd, untouchable and unstoppable, Ethan realized she'd been right. He'd lost more than a wife, he'd lost an empire. And Lila Monroe, the secret heiress, was just getting started. The revelation hit Ethan Caldwell like a freight train. The woman he'd cast aside, his pregnant wife, Clara, wasn't just the quiet, unassuming partner he'd underestimated for years. She was the secret heir to a real estate empire, the daughter of the late Mogul Victor Hargrove, whose name was synonymous with skyscrapers, luxury estates, and billion-dollar deals. Ethan, a tech CEO whose startup had skyrocketed him to fame and fortune, had believed he was the master of his own destiny. He'd built his empire from scratch, or so he thought, priding himself on his ruthless ambition and unyielding drive. But now, as he stood in his sleek Manhattan penthouse, staring at the documents his private investigator had uncovered, the ground beneath him seemed to crumble. Clara's lineage was a closely guarded secret, one even she hadn't known until recently. Victor Hargrove had been a man of mystery, his personal life shrouded in rumors of estranged family members and hidden heirs. When he died a year ago, his will had sparked a frenzy in the media, with speculation about who would inherit his vast fortune. Most assumed it would go to distant relatives or his trusted board members. No one suspected Clara, a woman who'd lived modestly, working as a freelance architect while married to Ethan. She'd never flaunted wealth or hinted at her connection to Hargrove. Ethan had always seen her as a liability, too soft, too sentimental, not glamorous enough for the high-flying world he craved. That's why he'd turned to Isabella, the supermodel whose face graced billboards and whose charm had captivated him at a charity gala. Isabella was everything Clara wasn't. Bold, dazzling, and perfectly suited to the image Ethan wanted to project. The affair had started innocently enough, a flirtation over champagne, a few late-night texts. But it quickly spiraled into something more. Ethan, intoxicated by Isabella's allure and the thrill of secrecy, began to resent Clara's presence in his life. Her pregnancy, announced just months after his affair began, felt like a chain tightening around his neck. He'd never wanted children, not yet, not when his company was on the verge of a multi-billion-dollar IPO. Clara's quiet insistence on keeping the baby, her soft-spoken dreams of a family, only deepened his disdain. So, he made the decision that would haunt him. He filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, and moved Isabella into a lavish apartment he'd purchased in secret. Clara, devastated but dignified, left without a fight, taking only her clothes and a few personal belongings. Ethan thought he'd won freedom, a new life, a new partner who matched his ambition. But the documents in his hands told a different story. Clara wasn't just an heir, she was the sole beneficiary of Hargrove's estate, a fortune that dwarfed Ethan's tech wealth. The investigators' report detailed how Hargrove had hidden Clara's identity to protect her from his enemies, raising her through a trusted friend under an assumed name. Clara had only learned the truth after his death, when a lawyer contacted her with the will. She'd kept it quiet, not out of shame but out of caution, wary of the vultures who'd circle once her identity was revealed. Ethan's heart pounded as he read the numbers. Properties worth billions, offshore accounts, stakes in companies he'd only dreamed of acquiring. Clara, the woman he'd discarded, now held the keys to an empire that could crush his own. His mind raced back to their marriage. Clara had always been reserved, her focus on her architectural sketches rather than the social climbing Ethan thrived on. He'd mocked her for it, calling her work a hobby, dismissing her late-night drawings as distractions from his world of boardrooms and power plays. Now, he saw those sketches in a new light. Many of Hargrove's most iconic buildings bore subtle signatures of her style, the clean lines, the innovative use of space. Had she been quietly shaping her father's legacy all along? The thought made him sick with regret. He'd underestimated her, and now she was poised to outshine him in ways he couldn't fathom. Ethan's first instinct was to call her, to beg for forgiveness, to weave himself back into her life. But Clara wasn't the same woman he'd left. The investigators' report included recent photos. Clara at a real estate conference, commanding the room in a tailored suit, her pregnancy barely visible under her poised demeanor. She'd stepped into her role as Hargrove's heir with a quiet ferocity that unnerved him. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was building something, her own legacy, her own empire. And she didn't need him. Meanwhile, Isabella was proving to be more trouble than she was worth. The model's charm had faded quickly, replaced by demands for more money, more attention, more of Ethan's time. She'd begun posting cryptic messages on social media, hinting at their relationship in ways that threatened his carefully curated public image. The press was starting to sniff around, and Ethan knew a scandal could tank his company's IPO. He'd thought Isabella was his ticket to a glamorous new chapter, but she was becoming a liability. Worse, she had no idea about Clara's newfound status. If she found out, Ethan feared she'd cling even tighter, or worse, try to sabotage Clara out of jealousy. He poured himself a whiskey, his hands trembling. How had he miscalculated so badly? Clara had never been the weak link he'd imagined. She'd been the one with the real power, hidden in plain sight. He thought of their last conversation, when she'd looked at him with those calm, knowing eyes and said, "You'll regret this, Ethan. Not today, but soon." He'd laughed it off, but now her words echoed like a prophecy. He could try to fight her in court, claim a share of her fortune through their divorce, but he knew it was a losing battle. Clara's legal team, backed by Hargrove's resources, would bury him. And the public would eat it up, a tech CEO brought low by his own greed and betrayal. Ethan's phone buzzed. It was Isabella, demanding to know why he hadn't returned her calls. He ignored it, his mind racing with possibilities. Could he win Clara back? Could he spin this to his advantage, paint himself as the wronged husband who'd been deceived by her secrecy? The idea was laughable even to him. Clara wasn't the type to play games or seek revenge, but she also wasn't the type to forgive easily. She'd moved on, and he was the one left scrambling. The next morning, Ethan woke to a news alert. Clara had announced a new real estate venture, a sustainable urban development project that was already drawing praise from industry leaders. Her name was everywhere, tied not just to Hargrove's legacy but to her own vision. Investors were flocking to her, and Ethan's own board members were whispering about missed opportunities. He felt the walls closing in. His company, once the darling of the tech world, now seemed small compared to the empire Clara was building. He tried to reach her, but her number was disconnected. Her old email bounced back. She'd cut him out completely, and the realization stung more than he expected. Ethan had always prided himself on being untouchable, but Clara had exposed his vulnerability. She hadn't just survived his betrayal, she'd thrived because of it. And now, as he watched her rise, he was forced to confront the truth. He'd thrown away the one person who could have been his equal, his partner, his legacy. In a last-ditch effort, Ethan hired a PR firm to spin a narrative of reconciliation, hoping to salvage his image. But the public wasn't buying it. Social media was ablaze with support for Clara, the wronged wife who'd emerged as a powerhouse. Memes mocked Ethan's fall from grace, and ex-posts called him out for his arrogance. One post, from an anonymous account, hit hardest, kicked out his pregnant wife for a model, only to find out she's a billionaire heir. Karma's a CEO's worst nightmare. Ethan shut his laptop, the whiskey bottle empty beside him. He'd built his life on control, on always being the smartest in the room. But Clara had outplayed him, not through deception but through her own quiet strength. As he stared out at the city skyline, much of it owned by the empire Clara now controlled, he realized the game was over. And he'd lost.